Uh, okay, now we're official, I guess. All right, thank you all for being here. Appreciate the members of the task force and the members of the public coming to our second hospital task force meeting. I think what we're going to do is we're going to reorder the agenda a little bit. We're going to start with the couple remarks from Councilmember Renagi and myself, and then we're going to go right into the Providence presentation. And then task force members will have a chance to pose some questions, and then the members of the public will have a chance to speak. So I'll turn it over to Councilmember Renagi for a couple of introductory remarks.
Thank you, Councilmember Whalen, and thank you everyone for taking the time to be here. And we also appreciate having Providence here at the table, because I think all of us in Laguna understand that public safety is obviously the #1 responsibility of local government, and there's nothing that we take more seriously than the health and safety of all of our residents. Those are our goals as a city, is to make sure that we protect our residents. Providence has their goals about the entire healthcare system, and the goal here is to how do we align those goals so that we can ensure that the future of healthcare in Laguna Beach is one where we know that people get access to the care that they need. Bob and I often joke that this has turned into almost a third, or for me, I guess, a third full-time job. But in addition to council, this is really something that we've taken a lot of time over the past few months, including forming this task force. We have an internal analysis going on with our fire department to really understand what are the paramedic calls that are going to Little Mission, which is the Laguna Beach campus, as well as Big Mission. I saw this firsthand 2 weekends ago, where I did a ride along with our fire department, and we saw I saw firsthand how long it takes when we have to go and reroute to Big Mission. It takes a fire truck out of the city for, on a beach day, an hour and 40 minutes. That's in addition to the fact that we have at the local campus. The question that we're still trying to figure out is, what is the impact on people? Because they're not going with a stroke to the Laguna Beach campus, but oftentimes there are alternative stabilization practices that take place. So that's why it's great that we have not only Seth Teagan, but a representative from the emergency department. In addition to that, our ad hoc committee has been meeting with the county healthcare department. They have a role as it relates to when a closure happens. They look at the impact of it. And the goal is to use that data to understand not only locally, but also regionally, what is the impact of any potential changes to what's happening, what's being proposed here. And then in addition to that, we've met with representatives from the Attorney General's office to talk about all of the alternatives that are available to us under state law. And finally, the city has issued a request for information. The goal there is to get a team of experts at the city's disposal so that we are able to have the requisite technical expertise to understand all of the tools that we have in terms of leverage, but also just in terms of understanding the implications. Because as we said at the beginning of this, the goal here is a win-win situation. We don't control the hospital. We don't own that land, but we have powers as it relates to land use and other tools at our disposal. So again, thank you everyone for being here. I think that the great attendance today speaks to the importance of this issue. Thank you again to Providence for being here. The goal is to really get all of the questions out there so that we can have a discussion and ultimately a hopefully win-win outcome here that is informed by a transparent shared understanding of all the facts that are at play. So I'll turn it back to Councilmember Whalen for anything that I missed in terms of the updates of the task force.
No, I think that was very thorough in terms of what we've been working on the last several weeks. Maybe one other addition: we have met with Providence and our lobbying firm to talk about the possibility of state legislation that would allow for a standalone ER and emergency room, which currently is not allowed under California law. In fact, was a piece of legislation vetoed by Governor Newsom a couple years ago. But anyway, we've initiated the process. Don't know whether that's a fruitful avenue to pursue or not, but we did have a good conversation with Providence and our lobby group. So I think at this point, Seth, I'd like to turn it over to you to go ahead and kick off the presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember Whalen, Councilmember Renagi, and a special thanks to Dave Kiff as well, the city manager. Just great partners, great communication along the way. So I've really appreciated all the time we've spent together with the ad hoc committee that is also part of this hospital task force. I'm Seth Tegan. I'm the Chief Executive at Providence Mission Hospital in Mission Viejo in Laguna Beach. I've been here for 7 years, and I have a couple people that I brought with me here this evening. I have Dr. Melanie Wolf, our Chief Medical Officer. I'll let her introduce herself, and then Rachel Selleck from our Government Affairs team. Dr. Wolf.
Hi, everybody. It's really an honor to be here. I'm Dr. Melanie Wolf. I'm an internal medicine physician. And just for clarity, I do not represent the emergency department. I'm currently the Chief Medical Officer at Mission Hospital, which includes the Mission Viejo campus and the Laguna Beach campus. Just for a little historical perspective, when I graduated residency in 2004, that's when I came on staff at Mission Hospital as a hospitalist physician. And during my time as a hospitalist physician at Mission Hospital, I was chair of the Department of Medicine for a few years, chief of staff, and eventually transitioned to the chief medical officer role in January of 2023. And it's an honor to be here. I'm really glad that I can be here and represent Providence and the community.
Rachel?
Thanks, Seth, and thank you to the city council members, Dave Kiff, and all of you for. Thanks, everybody, for being here and for allowing us to present. My name is Rachel Selleck, and I'm Providence's Chief Government Affairs Officer for California.
Great. Can we get our slide? We have a slide deck that we'd like to share with the task force this evening. One, just again, to start with a thank you for the task force. We're excited to be here. I see lots of familiar faces here with us. We have many of our caregivers and physicians here in the audience as well. So really looking forward to what we hope will be a very open and honest dialogue with all of you here this evening. I think we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. We were the recipient of many questions from the hospital task force, about 50 of them. I would tell you we're going to try to do our best. We've tried to put those together thematically. We're going to try to answer as many of those questions as possible this evening, but I know there's also going to be an opportunity to ask additional questions or more detailed questions at the end. So look forward to addressing that with the entire group. The only other thing that I would add in that regard is some of the requests that have come from the task force are maybe a little premature. And what I mean by that is, one, we don't have a final program or proposal that we're going to be sharing this evening. Again, we're going to try to share some themes with you and some things that we're talking about internally. The second part of that is some of the stuff that Councilmember Ranagi and Whalen have asked for as it relates to community impact. Much of that comes from the Orange County Healthcare Agency, and the Orange County Healthcare Agency won't do a study until we officially announce what we're going to do. So just so you know, there is a sequence of events that will help inform some of the requests from this group, from the hospital task force, but we're happy to partner with both the city and the task force on all of that work ahead of us. And then just lastly, a few requests that we would consider to be proprietary or internal business for Providence Mission Hospital that we won't respond to at all. And if we get additional questions about those this evening, we'll just probably decline to answer them. But you can go to the next slide if you would. And you'll have to forgive me. I have some notes here because we have a lot of stuff that we want to cover with this group. So thank you, Beckett. One, when we came to this city council in January of this year and shared our intention of no longer running an acute care hospital in Laguna Beach, that was very intentional in terms of timing. We wanted to do it with enough runway where we felt like we could really partner with the city and community members and city council and other elected officials on what the future of healthcare could and should look like in the city of Laguna Beach. 6 months later, I hope you feel like we've been very intentional about listening to community members. I've received numerous emails, phone calls, messages on our website for folks that are very interested in what the future is going to look like and also wanting to be part of the process and better understand what the vision is for the future. That's really that first box on here. Our commitment is that we're going to continue to have the city be a very active part. You as community members, not unique to Laguna Beach, really the coastal communities in which this hospital has served for many years, to be part of the process and to be part of the design process. The themes that we've gotten out of this work, I think, are pretty straightforward, and we're going to get to those on the next slide. But we're very open to exploring the creative solutions, I think. I want this group to hear that tonight. One of the pieces of feedback we've gotten that's very clear is people are very passionate about access to emergency care. I mean, this is not surprising to us. But I would say a loud voice coming from the communities around access to 24/7 care, access to emergency medicine. As you heard Councilmember Whalen share earlier, we are fully committed to partnering with the city and the task force and the city council on looking at how we can maintain or continue to provide emergency care in this community. As we shared in earlier meetings throughout the course of the year, today in the state of California, that is not something that is allowed. However, I was even talking to a few folks before the meeting. I think Laguna Beach is not alone. There are many communities across the state of California that are going to be in this exact same situation that we're in. We have the challenge of our geography, having one road in and out of this city, access to emergency care. We have a lot of visitors that come to this community. How do we create a scenario where people can still have access to emergency care, but it's not in an acute care hospital? And when I say acute care hospital, what I want to clarify for folks is inpatient beds. I'm not talking about all the other services that exist on the campus. We're talking about the ability to admit patients to an inpatient bed. But we're happy to continue this exploration with the city. And that's why we have Rachel and our government affairs team involved, along with the city of Laguna Beach and their lobbyists, to talk about how we can possibly take something to Sacramento together from a healthcare perspective, but also from a community perspective, and really advocate, I think, for what many people in this community want, again, and that's access to emergency care. Number 3 up there, we've engaged a third-party consultant. You may be wondering, well, what's the third-party consultant for? The third-party consultant that we've retained is going to be looking at the property in totality here in Laguna Beach. So the 20-plus acres that we own along PCH, and talking about what is the best and highest use of that property. I also want to reassure you that there is going to be an opportunity for the hospital task force, the city council, and the community to interact with that third-party consultant. We very specifically selected this group to come in because they have expertise in working across the United States with cities and municipalities on land and land reimagining. And the most important part to us, at least from a Providence perspective, is the healthcare component. I think Councilmember Renagi's earlier comments around land use and the entitlements and how the property is set up becomes a really critical conversation. We want to get the healthcare component right, where the city feels really great about what is going to be on that campus and what access to care looks like. And then we can have a conversation together around what does the rest of that property look like? What are the things that you as a community member in Laguna Beach or the coastal communities would like to see on that property? What is going to add value to the city and the surrounding municipalities? So that's number 3. And then number 4, again, we're going to continue to listen and engage with the city, healthcare partners and residents, and of course this task force. We have some things at the end of our presentation that we'll propose in relationship to interacting with the task force. It's really important to us. Clearly, the people that are on this group are passionate about this topic for a whole host of reasons, and we're very committed to just being part of the process with you and not doing anything in a silo. You can go to the next slide, please. So there are kind of 3 themes that we got out of all the questions. Again, 50 questions submitted by the hospital task force, and we've tried to bucket those into a little bit of a narrative. 1, the why we're evolving, and some of that just has to do with the level of activity that's on the campus and the type of patients that we see today. The regional capacity and emergency access. Again, part of this will be work that we'll do in partnership with the Orange County Healthcare Agency as we study and do an impact report. But just know that we have studied the entire kind of what I'll call 10 square miles around the Laguna Beach campus, and where a lot of patients are coming from, along with the zip codes that we're coming from, and how we can best serve this community. And also a recognition of why the Mission Viejo campus was built. It came after the Laguna Beach campus. It came in 1971, but in the 80s, it transitioned to really this area's regional trauma center. And the importance of the trauma center and kind of this hub and spoke model that we've lived in a long time, where really acute patients are transferred to Mission Viejo when they're in need of a certain type of specialist, a certain type of equipment, or a certain type of procedure. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And again, this future model of care. The future model of care is an open-ended invitation to the city, to the city council, and to this task force around let's talk about what that looks like. No decisions have been made. We don't have a final template. The only decision that we're not going to revisit is whether or not we run a full service acute care hospital. We've made that decision as an organization for a whole host of reasons, but that doesn't mean that we're not open to having emergency medicine on the campus or any of the other services that exist there today. It's really the access to inpatient beds that would go away in a future state scenario. I think you can go to the next slide. Utilization, I talked a little bit about as we've shared earlier in the year. The hospital on any given day typically has a census. It can be lower than 20 patients and can be higher than 20, but usually not by very much. The majority of those patients are often elective surgery patients, so they're short stay patients. So there's only probably at any given time less than 15 patients, maybe 10 patients on the campus that are there for true medical reasons, or they're in a medical bed and not there for an elective procedure or surgery. That low level of utilization is very hard to attract specialists and other doctors to come to the campus because of just the mathematics of practicing medicine. And I'm going to let Dr. Wolf talk a little bit more about that in a future slide here. This Providence Mission Viejo is a regional destination. That's true not only for the city of Laguna Beach, but all of our coastal communities. There are only 3 trauma centers in all of Orange County. If you don't know, it's us, OC Global, and UC Irvine. We see about 5,000 traumas a year, and those traumas come from Newport Beach, Laguna Beach, all the way down to Camp Pendleton. We serve the military base down there. We see patients from Oceanside all the way out to Costa de Cas and then kind of to South Irvine. So we really are a regional medical center, and that's where we have really kind of our super specialists that are on call in every discipline you can imagine, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so if you have something really acute, whether that be a stroke or a heart attack or a trauma, the ambulance never stops in Laguna Beach. And if it does by accident because it wasn't called correctly in the field. They are going to come to Mission Viejo for those really acute things. And I think that's important for our community to understand because you want to go to the place where you're going to get the highest level of care and you have all those experts. Laguna Beach and its ER in particular, I think, serve a very important role in this community, and that's that 24/7, 365 access to care. And again, that's part of the future planning and partnership we want to do with the hospital task force. And then the retrofitting. We've received a lot of questions, again, in those themes of help us understand the cost of seismic, help us understand that $300 to $350 million number. We have 16 hospitals across the state of California, all of which are faced with the same seismic mandate. That number is in the billions and billions and billions of dollars for our health system. We have real estate experts and construction experts that are part of our organization that do those assessments on what the seismic retrofitting would cost campus by campus based on square footage, the age of utilities, the age of the physical plant. We have done that assessment in Laguna Beach. We have submitted that paperwork to HCI, so our regulatory bodies know exactly that we have no intention of retrofitting that building. And just so you have a sense, if we did $300 million of retrofitting at the Laguna Beach campus, you would not get a new hospital. You would get a hospital that has met the seismic requirements, that has X amount of thousands of gallons of potable water, X amount of space for wastewater, X amount, the ability to stay online for 3 days with an underground fuel tank. Those are some of the things. You don't get access to new technology, new physicians, new inpatient beds, none of that. You get a bunch of stuff that's behind the scenes that doesn't help generate activity or add new services to this community, which I think ultimately is one of the things that we want to do. And you can go to the next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wolf.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's really an honor to be here and be able to discuss this with you. So a lot of this will be repetition to what Seth already said, but we're really using the data that we have to really help determine how can we best serve the people of Laguna Beach, understanding who is accessing care and how they are accessing care. So in that, the Laguna Beach Emergency Department is an emergency receiving center, meaning the level of care that's offered to patients who come to that emergency room is limited. Patients with heart attacks and strokes are not coming to Laguna Beach. They are coming to Mission Viejo. Trauma patients and critically ill children are coming to Mission Viejo. These patients are transferred to Mission Viejo in an ambulance. And ambulances nowadays are essentially an ICU on wheels. It's not the back of a station wagon, but really in a roving ICU. And in fact, patients who require a higher level of care, even from Mission Hospital, are transferred to Cedars-Sinai, UCLA, in an ambulance on the 405 in traffic for a higher level of care. This is a not unusual practice. Most of the patients, and we'll get into this data further, most of the patients who do visit our emergency room in Laguna Beach do not require hospital admission. And as a result, as we look at this data, let's be smart about how we utilize finite resources to best serve the community. So if we can look at the next slide, please. We are investing in the Mission Viejo campus currently. If you were to drive by there, you would see that we are building a third tower. At the same time, we are also expanding our emergency department. And the expansion of the emergency department includes approximately 20 observation beds and triage beds. Those observation beds will allow for 23-hour hospital admissions. They will be for patients who would otherwise take up an inpatient bed and would be discharged the following day. And what that leads to is really a lot of inefficiencies in the utilization of our inpatient beds. This observation unit in our emergency department, though it be 17 beds, will allow us to increase our capacity for patient care because those short stays will no longer be taking up an inpatient bed. So that will improve our efficiency and will also improve our delivery of care and overall hospital throughput. So as you can see, 84% of patients who come to the the Laguna Beach Emergency Department are seen, treated, and discharged. Emergency department patients are designated a level of acuity, ES1 being the most acute. Think of heart attacks, strokes, patients on a ventilator, patients with unstable vital signs, all the way down to an ES5. Think of those patients as just needing a quick exam before going on their way. Those ES1 patients are coming to Mission Viejo already. You can see on average, and this is 2025 aggregate data collected by the county as well as Providence, 0.05 patients a day. These patients, your loved ones, are coming to Mission Viejo. Of the ES level 2s, about 10 per day, about 40% or 4 of those are psychiatric patients requiring a psychiatric higher level of care. And they're coming to Laguna Beach because Laguna Beach is deemed a psychiatric receiving center. So again, 40% of those ES2s are psych patients. The rest, ES3, ES4, ES5, those are considered stable patients. And those are patients that are either transferred to Mission Hospital or can be for a higher level of care and multi-specialty care, or they're seen and they're discharged home. If we can go to the next slide, please. So we should all be very proud of Mission Hospital, Mission Viejo. It is a level 2 trauma center. It's a stroke receiving center. It's a heart attack receiving center. And we are Joint Commission certified for our cardiac care, our sepsis care, and our neurology care. We are also certified by the American College of Surgeons to be a level 2 trauma center. And what that means is we have to have, to be certified as a level 2 trauma center, a wide breadth and deep width of physicians, as well as imaging and technology and support to take care of the sickest patients. This is essentially a tertiary level care. We receive transfers into Mission Hospital, not just from Laguna Beach, but also from Memorial Care and Hoag. Any trauma patient from any other center in South Orange County that's not a trauma center, we're the only one, comes to us. And the county has designated that the county does not need any more than 3 trauma centers, with the other 2 being WestMed, which is now global, and UCI. So the investments that we are making in Mission Viejo that I just talked about are there to ensure the highest quality of care and to ensure the efficiency and the availability to care for the patients in Laguna Beach. So next slide, please.
I'm just going to add a couple of things there, Dr. Wolf, if I may. If you go back a slide. So we see about 17,000 patients a year in our emergency department in Laguna Beach, about 3,400 of which need admission to the hospital. But in that previous slide where you saw the acuity, it tells a pretty compelling story about the level of care, the level of acuity that folks are being admitted for in Laguna Beach. A really important part of what we're sharing tonight is this idea of our ER expansion on the other campus. We're going from a little over 40 beds to over 60 beds. That is actually going to open in October of this next year, so October of 27, far ahead of any change that's going to occur in the Laguna Beach community. But really, it is in preparation for what a future state could potentially look like. And even with the fact that there's only 3,400 admissions out of those 17,000 visits, and most of the patients are low acuity, we, Providence Mission Hospital, are still extremely interested and very open to partnering with the city and the task force and this community on having standalone emergency care available, should we be able to do it together. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you. So next slide, please.
I think I already covered this, just around if you're interested in our seismic ratings, all of that is available out online. You can go on the HCI website. It's all publicly reported. Hospitals across California had to have all of their seismic retrofitting plans into the state prior to, I believe, the first of the year. We have done that. We, of course, have submitted plans that we are not going to be seismically retrofitting the Laguna Beach campus for the reasons that we've already discussed. You can go to the next slide. And then just kind of in closing, these three last points. One, we want to continue to have forums like this, in particular with the task force. Again, the task force is a representative group of folks across the coastal communities, not just Laguna Beach. There are folks from different coastal communities that are participating in this and with different expertise. We want to have a regular dialogue and forum with this group. We intend to host those forums. We would love to get something on the books here later in the year when we have, I think, a more prescriptive update around programming and some ideas that we can do on the campus. In addition, we'd like to create a forum where the task force and the city council or the ad hoc committee can interact with our third-party consultant that's going to be coming in. And again, think of the third-party consultant as somebody that is kind of sitting in between the two of us, really trying to get to a place of agreement on what we think the best and highest use of the property could be and what the healthcare components should look like in the future. And then just again, in closing, I think this is great news. I hope you're excited about the news of our willingness to explore standalone emergency medicine in this community. Even though it's not allowed, we really think with our government affairs team and with the support of the city and community that there is a real opportunity for us to pursue this, because Laguna Beach is not alone. There are hospitals across the state of California that are in the exact same situation, whether it be for activity, their location, they're rural by nature, or the seismic deadline that they're faced with. It's really multifactorial, not just one of those things kind of informs the decision. But I think it's a great opportunity for us to work together and do something really special, just like the people that came before us in 1959. It is our time for this community to reimagine what it could and should be for the next generations that are going to come and enjoy living in Laguna Beach and the surrounding coastal communities. And we look forward to doing that in the future. Look forward to our continued partnership with Councilmember Renagi and Councilmember Whalen. And I think that's all we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, Seth and Dr. Wolf. So I think what I'd like to do now is turn it over to the task force members first to see if you have any questions that you want to discuss with the representatives from Providence. And then we'll have an opportunity for public input after that. So I know there's a couple of members of the task force that reached out to me with some questions they wanted to pose, and the first of them is sitting very close to the mic there, John Thomas. So John, do you want to kick things off for us?
Yes, hi. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. Learned a lot. I'd prepared these in advance. You've touched on some, but I'm going to do it anyway. My first question is, will Providence be willing to continue operating the emergency room and hospital after 2030 if the current state deadline for seismic improvements is extended, which it sounds like you're going to look into, or if seismic requirement is otherwise modified, such as a distinction between the SBC1 and SBC2 ratings of the hospitals and whether they could be split out, since you're in SBC2, I believe. So that's really the question. Would you be willing to continue if those things changed?
Rachel, I don't know if you have a comment on this from a legislative standpoint, but I think from our perspective, we've made the decision that we're no longer going to run a full service acute care hospital. I think that's number one. That's something we're trying to be clear on, that we're not willing to revisit. Given all the other information I shared, the low level of acuity, the low level of use on the campus, our inability to get physicians there that want to practice medicine and specialists there, given the low level of activity. So I think that answers part of your question. Would we consider continuing to run the hospital? I don't think I can answer a future state question around if the legislation changes. I think that's a discussion that we would have to have. But I think that's future state. So my answer would be, I don't know. I'm sorry.
That's kind of a follow-on more or less to this. I'm kind of a numbers guy, and I assume a lot of things boil down to numbers and dollars and costs. If ongoing costs are the issue, setting aside, as your website basically says, your Laguna Beach Care future website states, beyond the seismic compliance needs, we cannot continue to sustainably operate an acute care hospital at Laguna Beach. To me, that seems to imply, you've mentioned some additional things, but to me, I think it boils down largely to the economics, to the cost. So my question is, what's the cost on an ongoing basis? Can you give us a ballpark number?
I can't give you a ballpark number, but I think that's something that we'd be happy to explore with the task force in the future. What I would say is just to provide some perspective around the economics, and I appreciate the question. On any given day, we see between 40 and 50 patients that come through our emergency department. Again, only a handful of those are admitted. If you look at the hospital in totality, for the most part, that bed tower that's on PCH is vacant. We have one floor in that entire bed tower that's actually seeing patients and doing patient care. But when you're running a hospital, it doesn't matter how many patients are there. We have to have all the services available. So whether there's 40 patients coming through the ER or 220 a day that we see on the other campus, we have to have somebody in the radiology department, in the laboratory department, in the pharmacy, an operating room team that's on call, nursing that's available, critical care that's available. So there's a lot of parts of that. So yes, the economics lend themselves to not being favorable, given the low level of activity that we have.
Right.
If that answers your question.
Well, I understand. I kind of look at it as a fixed cost, variable cost problem. You got a big fixed cost, and I may be completely wrong, but I'm looking at it as a subsidy conversation. I have no idea whether the community would be willing to subsidize, but if we would, what's the gap? I mean, your financial statements on Providence are publicly available for the 50 hospital system, and there are 990s on Mission, but Laguna Beach is not broken out. So it would be really helpful if we could see the numbers, at least in generalities, for Mission, to understand like what share of the total Mission combined finances are applicable here. Is this a $20 million, $30 million a year revenue operation, and are your losses $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, $5 million,
Sure.
something like that? Just ballpark.
It's an investment every year. And just as a point of clarity, and I should have mentioned this, the Laguna Beach campus is not a standalone hospital, even though we think of it that way. It is a department of the Mission Viejo campus and rides on the Mission Viejo bed license. So just a point of clarity, because I think that's a confusing one sometimes, because they're in different locations and people assume it's its own standalone entity. It rides on the license in Mission Viejo.
But you would be willing to work with us a little bit to try to understand the order of magnitude?
I think we would determine what is proprietary to the organization and what we're comfortable sharing.
Okay. That was really one question. My second one, I call this is win-win, as Alex described it. I believe the whole topic needs a radical rethink. We need to figure out how we can help each other achieve something. We understand that Providence, like many other hospitals, face many challenges today. The community's healthcare challenge, as I see it, is how we have the highest level of quality healthcare available. Personally, this is me, my aspiration is to see Laguna have a better, admittedly smaller, healthcare facility than we've had in the past, and maybe better than anything around, including some of the greatest, coolest stuff at Hogan Big Mission, with all the best and latest equipment so that the best doctors and staff want to practice there, want to fight to be there, because you get the greatest toys to play with. I'd like to see it so big that, so good that people will want to get sick just so they can come here and be cured.
I don't know.
So the question is, what can we do to help each other meet these challenges? What would it take to change your plans? Very open question. From closing the emergency department and the other facilities. I mean, you're very clear, that's the plan. Could that be changed under any circumstances is basically what we're after.
I love the question. Thank you. And we share in your aspiration. We share in your aspiration that we think there is a path for us to make healthcare better in this community, to add services in this community, to add physicians that aren't here today, that could come in the future to this community, and practicing in a new center that could potentially include emergency medicine. I mean, that is the aspirational goal. So I think that is work we get to do in partnership with the task force, honestly. And it really kind of starts, I think, tonight. I mean, that's the opening of this conversation, right? The things that the task force and this community are really passionate about and want to see in the future. The things that we think as the healthcare provider that we can share with you and provide in the future, and then how do we get to that common goal of making healthcare better in Laguna Beach? We have that in common. So just know there's an openness to partner on that work and an invitation to be part of it. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it in a room with no windows. That's why we're here tonight.
Just so that I'm clear, you've been very clear that you do not plan to continue with an acute care hospital there. And I'm really trying to make the fine line distinction. Is there any possibility you would reconsider that?
No.
Okay. So in that case, part B is if that's absolutely unequivocal, is there any basis on which Providence would be willing, and you're hiring a real estate consultant, obviously, to lease the facility if we can find someone else who thinks differently than you do and who thinks that they could make something with an acute capability and ER capability work there? Would you be willing to have that conversation about literally going away?
We would not. Part of the reason that we came to this community is we viewed Laguna Beach as our community to care for.
Please, let's be respectful. No, we don't want to. Let's just let the conversation happen.
Okay, well, that was clear. Okay, my others are pretty easy. We're trying to understand, is the entire hospital SPC2, could either, is that or yes, no, or could we see the study so that we could understand whether some parts of the building could be retrofit at more economically, or whether the entire building is simply SPC2 and has.
Yeah, so the challenge becomes with the seismic stuff. Almost all of the campus is SPC2, and all this is on HCI, and you can look at it and you can see a drawing of the campus. The problem with running, if we wanted to retrofit, as an example, just part of the campus, it's still attached to non-seismically compliant space, meaning, our campus is spread out. Even like radiology is adjacent to the emergency department, and the laboratory is adjacent there. And then, we go into our bed tower, and our inpatient unit is a floor up, and it's tied to a physical plant that's it's the farthest point from the emergency department on the campus. That physical plant has all the same seismic requirements. So you can't kind of cobble, if that makes sense, the campus together, because so many of the services and spaces and utilities are intertwined.
John, can I jump in on this? 'Cause just to clarify, this is kind of based on a previous conversation we had, but also kind of to John's earlier question. Let's say tomorrow the governor and the legislature adopted legislation that said no seismic requirements. That wouldn't change the decision-making process of Providence to close the hospital and ER in 2030. Just to clarify, because I'm trying to isolate the variables, kind of like what John's
Yeah,
asking here.
I would say I can't speculate on that.
No, but let's say that they did tomorrow. You're not committed to, it's not the seismic that's driving the
I
issue.
won't be the person to answer that question.
Okay.
That'll be an organizational
Okay.
discussion.
Okay, two more, these are quick. Regarding the timing, and it is January 1, 2030, right? That's a deadline. Will you be able to complete what you envision by the deadline? I'm trying to figure out how that's going to work. I guess I've been assuming your enhanced urgent care facility would be a new building. Is that wrong? Would you be, I mean, I can't figure out how you could get it planned and done in that amount of time if it's a new building. So are you just planning to reuse some of the existing building, which is kind of interesting in light of the conversation 1 second ago about then now you're back in the SPC in the seismic problem.
We have other buildings on the campus that aren't tied to seismic compliance.
So you could do this in an office building? Or
We have other buildings on the campus that we could explore doing something else. And we have a couple options that we've explored that I think would be a great exercise for us to spend time with the hospital task force on in a future meeting, talking about both the programming and the location and the level of services that we're envisioning having on the campus, inclusive of potentially emergency medicine.
Okay. Last one. The plaques on the walls of the Mission Hospital Laguna Beach list hundreds and maybe thousands of donors to that hospital over the years who will be presumably pretty disappointed to see the facility and the results of all those contributions diminished. I'm kind of curious if you have a number on how much has been donated.
I don't, and remember that we're not the original owner of the hospital. We came in when Adventist Health was intending to close that hospital. We kind of ran at the opportunity to come and be the healthcare provider in this community. So the donations that are prior to us coming in there, how the hospital was born, it was not part of Providence or St. Joseph Health then. The donations that came after, yes, I'm sure we can figure out that number and share it with the task force.
It's more just kind of curiosity. And I mean, really, I only asking because, so what do you tell those people now? You give us a lot of money and we're just going to close the doors. So thank you. I appreciate you tolerating my.
No, thank you for your questions. They were great.
Okay. We want to hold applause. You can raise your hands. That's what we do here. All right, Tony, you're not on the task force, but I'm going to give you the courtesy of a former council member. So one question.
Thank you. I guess I look forward and know that someday people are going to say, who let this happen? You know, we had a hospital, we let this happen. My question would be, do MDs want to move to Laguna Beach if there's no hospital here? Well, they can see their patients, they go this way, or they can see their patients if they go that way, and the families will hope that the doctor will come and make rounds, but maybe they won't because the traffic's too bad. Will seniors buy a house in Laguna if there's no hospital? Are they going to move from someplace else and get a $4 million house except there's no hospital? And the town that has some of the worst traffic in the country. I've been an ER patient. I've taken people to Little Mission for ER, and I was in the hospital. I was in Big Mission last week. I didn't plan it that way, so I could testify, but I can tell you that I never, ever want to go back there again. And if I get picked
Hold your
up by
applause,
an
no applause.
ambulance, and what they say to each other in the ambulance, because their firefighters are wonderful, but they said Mission or Big Mission, if they say Big Mission, you're in trouble. And they said Big Mission to me, so I wasn't going to fight with him. But it's our town, and to have a town with an aging population and horrible traffic, and say goodbye to a really, really special place, because Little Mission has done great things, and I have good stories about that. But in the meantime, there are a lot of people here, and if they're if they share the concern about what life would be like in a town of traffic with no hospital.
Okay, wave your hands. Thank you very much. Okay, back to the task force. Any other task force members who would like to? Tom Gibbs, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for coming and thanks for the information. As with John, I think I learned a lot of things I hadn't been aware of before. And I appreciate you being here to listen to us. And maybe you'll learn some things, tonight and through our future collaboration. I encourage that collaboration. And I take you guys, at your word, and you're very sincere. I think you heard from at least Tony, who knows the pulse of this town, and certainly the task force members and myself, that there's a big concern about closing that ER. And in that connection, I appreciate your willingness to operate an ER on a standalone basis, but that's speculative, whether that's going to happen. So there's a lot of concerns in this town about closing, in other words, about some hard and fast positions that you've taken just in the last 20 minutes or so, and whether we can go in and maybe think a little bit broader, expand the box. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions kind of relating to those concerns, and maybe it'll help us understand that maybe our concerns are not as big, or maybe help you understand that our concerns are significant to where we really need to continue the emergency department beyond 2030, whether or not the state changes the law. The one big question is, are there any shortfalls of replacing or eliminating the emergency department, even replacing it with an urgent care facility, that residents should be concerned about? In other words, what impact, particularly critical care, will that closing have on the community? And I'll just say that you need to know that the demographics in this town continue to get older. I mean, I'm one of the young ones, but just overall, a lot of retirement people are coming here. There's a significant senior population here, prone to heart attacks, strokes, and other things that require quick response at an emergency room. So I kind of want to hear your, if you're feeling particularly doctor, what the shortfall will be in providing medical service, notwithstanding how great Mission Viejo is in closing this emergency room.
The goal with whatever comes next, and we hope that the state of California will listen to us as well as other people regarding standalone emergency departments.
Right.
But the goal is whatever comes next will be staffed with the same group that's staffing it now by ED physicians. We currently contract with an outside group for both Laguna Beach and Mission Viejo, and we are going to continue that relationship with that group to staff that facility, which will be able to take care of everything that it's being taken care of now by the same people. So in some ways, it's you can call it an urgent care, you can call it a center for high level of care, but it will, other than not receiving ambulance runs, we should be able to care for the same patients in the same way that we're doing it now with the same providers.
Okay, and I appreciate that, but I'm a little concerned. I mean, is there any significant differences in medical outcomes comparing having an emergency room department in Laguna Beach and closing that? And are there any significant differences, or does it just not matter whether there's an emergency room versus an urgent care?
I think access to care matters, and being able to have a patient and intervene and stabilize and transfer should be able to be done in a high-level urgent care and an emergency department. And that's what's happening now.
Well, as I understand it, and just correct me if I just want to go down this path a little bit, that only an emergency room can take ambulances. Is that right?
Correct. There would be no ambulance runs. Those would be going to Mission Viejo.
Which take longer to get to.
But remember, an ambulance is an ICU.
So you see no significant differences in outcome between an ambulance running, say, 20 minutes to an emergency room versus an hour and a half.
But those patients are already coming to Mission Viejo. If that patient is that acute in an ambulance, they're already coming to Mission Viejo. They're not going to Laguna Beach.
Okay. Well, one of the things is we have doctors on the task force, and we've talked a little bit about that. I don't know if they share your confidence, but that's something that we can continue to discuss. And the committees and the task force is going to look at that very carefully because we're very concerned about that. And I think the community is concerned as well.
If I may, I'll just add a comment.
Sure.
If we are allowed to run a standalone emergency department, then we will be allowed to accept ambulance traffic. I mean, that is what we're aspiring to do and what we've said we want to partner with the city on. So in essence, if we're able to do that in the future, there is no change. The only change is there's not beds for a patient to be admitted to as an inpatient. If the patient would need an inpatient bed, they would need to be transferred to the Mission Viejo campus. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I actually, that was something I learned tonight. I appreciate it. I think other do. We have two concerns about that. One is it might not happen, and two is whether the emergency room itself standalone provides adequate care to the community. But that's something that we're going to be talking about with you and looking at it as a task force and as a community. Another question that John Thomas talked a little bit about is whether there are any circumstances in which Providence will keep the emergency room open. Now, you talked about when if we change the law, but that might not happen. And I think we talked about legislation. Maybe have you looked at whether a smaller amount of either ICU or beds would be sufficient to continue to operate the emergency room at that location? I know we've got you're over capacity. You've explained that. I'm not fully understood why it's led to that because that capacity has been there for a long time. But if you reduce the capacity, is that a possible solution?
It is not one we've explored, but again, I think that's part of our work moving forward with the task force.
It's a question that I think me and a lot of people have in the task force. I think that that's something I would ask you and again, the task force will look at it. What can be done? What can you do to make a minimum level of hospital, acute, whatever services? I'm not a doctor. I'm a real estate land use lawyer. But what can be done to make in a minimal way that might be able to become a win-win, to use John's comment. In that connection, I think there, as in the past, you saw significant donor money coming to this hospital, including from, the Grosses, who contributed to the emergency room, is providing additional resources. And there's a lot of resources that can be found. Is that a possible solution to achieve a continuation of the emergency department, even if we don't get the legislation that we're looking for?
I don't think so. And the reason I say that is because of the SPC comment that I made earlier. We can't just run that ER on its own as it's attached to the rest of the physical plan. Again, very open to the conversation with this task force around programming and the things that folks want to see on the campus. So again, I would say one that we should talk about and address together.
Okay, and in that connection, what I'm going to ask you guys to do, and again, this further conversation, is bring that into the calculus, because it may become a situation where the strong feeling in the community is to maintain that emergency department. And just saying, no, it's not going to happen when all the possibilities haven't been explored, particularly given we've only got 3.5 years to 2030. I think we need to think creatively, we, including you and us, as to what combination of things, including donor money, could make this thing work. And then lastly, I was going to ask the same question about whether somebody else, or whether Providence would be open for somebody else to do that kind of package that's outside of the box you're talking about now, where the emergency department is maintained. I think there's going to be, if there is a way to do it, whether through change in legislation or some other, such as reducing the amount of hospital beds or something, and it becomes an economic issue, there's going to be a lot of pressure if Providence doesn't want to do it. And given the need for the emergency department, that Providence needs to be open to allow someone else to do it. So anyway, thank you for your time. Thank you for answering my questions and hearing me out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Ron, you
Hi.
want to introduce yourself just so everybody knows who you are?
Sure. Ron Geisman. I'd like to disagree with you on a couple things. You indicated that there really isn't a difference in transporting to here versus transporting up to Big Mission. I've been through two journal articles, one from 2014 by Lou in Health Affairs, that suggests that there is something like a 5% increase in adjusted outcomes that include patient death as a result of the closure of emergency departments in smaller hospitals. A 2019 article in the same journal, Health Affairs, by Tsai and Shen suggests that the mortality increase was more like 8% as a result of the closure of emergency departments in hospitals. With that said, so I think it needs to be looked at kind of hard. With that said, I think we as a committee need to hear some alternative voices, because I'm not sure that the narrative that we hear completely from you folks is necessarily the prevailing narrative that we'll hear from alternative voices. And we need to hear that. We need to be educated. So we plan to do that. So we want to hear other voices as well. The final concern I would suggest is, and you've heard the message very clearly, this community is not the least bit interested in having an outcome that does not provide for emergency department services in this community. It's very, very clear that that is our attitude as a community. So we're going to work from that perspective. And there are other alternatives. One of the things that we have to look at is when the hospital was built, it was built because of the death of Gordon French, a Laguna Beach policeman in 1953 who died in transit going to healthcare in Newport Beach. The problem then was pretty bad. The problem today is a lot worse. The population of 1953 was maybe a tenth of what it is today. The ability to get to emergency care, I don't care if you call it a ICU on wheels or not, is very difficult. Try to have a major cardiac event 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday in July at Main Beach. How long is it going to take to get somebody to Big Mission? A long time. We have to look at ourselves not as an adjunct of a larger community. We're really not that. We're 2 roads in and out of this town. We're isolated. We're more like a small town in middle America than we are like a large urban environment. We have to look out for our own. And so when we look forward to the future, we're going to be looking from that perspective, not from the perspective of being an adjunct of Big Mission. It's just a different kind of attitude. It's a different kind of need. And as Tony Eisman pointed out, there's a financial impact, an economic impact to losing the hospital in this town. Nobody is going to want to spend a large amount of money on buying a home in this town with no emergency services immediately available. That's just not going to happen. So home prices are going to go down, particularly among the very wealthy people. They're going to find a big bite in their home when they go to sell it. I wouldn't want to put this thing on that venal basis, but it's going to be a factor, and you're going to hear pushback from people on a variety of different levels.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Matt Kelleher. I'm from Dana Point, so excuse me, but I care about this too, as we all do down the street. Seth and Melanie, thank you guys for coming in and listening to this and our feedback. I'm curious, we've looked at some of the benchmarks, so comparison situations, certainly outside of the US, but certainly even in California and the US, and there are a number of them. Most of them seem to benefit by some of the reimbursement regulations because they qualify as either critical access or rural, which Laguna Beach, I can't find a way, if anybody else has, where we would benefit from that financial situation. And I'm encouraged by the fact that you're willing to look at this independent standalone emergency services, but I would hasten to call it that because I don't think it'll ever be completely independent, standalone. The question is, how do we integrate it into the mission hospital system and still provide timely access to care, to critical care, to assess people, stabilize the situation, and treat? I have yet to see any small hospitals anywhere in the US, including in California, that are able to do that with an emergency department that has 0 beds. And I want to clarify something here because I'd like to know how much flexibility we have in talking about the future state. When you say we won't run any acute beds, that doesn't exist. Is that requirement that the design for emergency services would have to have no beds that could either be used for stabilization, observation, or anything?
So I think we're very open to those conversations. And I think the beauty of doing it together and proposing something is we write the rules together in terms of what we're proposing. We have had conversations around observation beds as an example for patients that, again, maybe don't need to be admitted but need to be held. That is a conversation I think we would be more than happy to have with the task force. And again, we will defer to our clinicians, our physicians, on the kind of the design or clinical design that I think is going to be best for patients and the most sustainable.
So there are some small hospitals that are as small as 4 beds, but there are none with 0. And that would be a significant design barrier if we had to live with that in thinking about a future state. So the other question I have is, have you guys taken the 2025 data for the ED here, which I found very interesting, and actually modeled what is the smallest clinical platform that you could operate just using that data of who went to our ED? What is the smallest clinical platform that would still provide timely access and safe care, same outcomes in that setting? Because it seems to me we have the data that.
So I think that's our work moving forward, truly. We have a lot of the data and the data that we're happy to share with the task force around, again, the types of patients we see, where they're coming from, the zip codes they're coming from, their mode of transportation, whether or not they get admitted, the level of acuity that they're seeing within the ER, other services that they may be consuming like radiology, laboratory, pharmacy, whatever it might be. Very open to studying that, sharing the data, and coming up with a plan together that we can propose.
I'm particularly interested in not just could we send them to mission, but what would be the smallest platform that we would have to operate to actually absorb those same people without disrupting that. Now, with that being said, I think it's worth mentioning to everybody here that none of those hospitals that are in the same situation, and I can give you a couple examples. Catalina, first of all. Catalina has been struggling with this for a while. They run a 365, 24/7 emergency department. They have, I think, 10 beds. They have to be able to do stabilization, assessment, treatment, triage. They partnered with UCI. UCI provides the technology, the physicians. UCI doesn't own them or anything. They just simply provide the clinical services to do that. But you can imagine they're in a similar kind of situation as we are. Incline Village up in Tahoe area, in the Tahoe system, same kind of thing. These guys operate EDs, small emergency departments with a few beds. They have to figure out how to do it. Now, like I said, none of them with 0 beds. Actually, one of the ones I found the most interesting is Aspen. Aspen has this huge influx of tourists. They are in the middle of nowhere. They have to figure out what to do. All of these, and there are a few more actually, but all of these, interestingly enough, have been designated as this critical access hospital. And all of them get the extra reimbursement to be able to operate that. And the government, CMS, is actually starting one called, I think, Rural Hospital Access. But we would have a hard time in Southern California convincing anybody, despite your hopes and feelings that we feel that way sometimes, the bubble, that we should be. But there really isn't a designation that I can see right now where we would be able to do that. And of course, we can go to the state and try to get them to do it. But right now, to get us to allow Mission to be able to get the additional reimbursement for these kind of access services doesn't look possible. These other hospitals have that operate these situations because they're in that kind of situation. So that means that the revenue stream that they have to operate this independent ED may not be something that we can count on. Now, if that's the case, and we can figure out a design that keeps emergency services in Laguna, even with a small number of beds, isn't it likely that we're going to have to come up with some out-of-the-box revenue source that provides the Mission campus in Laguna with the ability to run an ED with some financial backing, if you will. Now, I'd be the last one to suggest philanthropy is where to go with this. I think the issue has to be recurring revenue. Where do we find recurring revenue? As an example, many people here probably don't know, but Catalina charges $4 for every ferry ride, no matter where you come from, to support the hospital over there. So the city, the island, decided, look, we've got to keep this hospital open, and that's what they did. So there are city situations. There are situations around the country where the provider charges the insurance company an access fee. You want to be able to use our hospital, then you're going to have to pay an access fee for the members that you have that do that. There are ground lease opportunities for recurring revenue. There might be an opportunity where Mission wants to subcontract to somebody to do memory care, where they know what they're doing. They bring somebody in, they provide the care, whatever, but there's revenue coming in from a source outside of just the regular ED and the 4 to 10 hospital beds that we might need. So I guess the question that I have about this is, has Mission already looked at these other revenue sources, by the way? Aspen, by the way, of course, did. They've got revenue sources. It's amazing. 80% of all the stuff's coming from outpatient to support the ED. Have you guys already looked at other financial sources, since we may not be able to get reimbursement for that would allow us to run an ED?
We have.
And can you tell us a little bit about what those might be?
Not this evening, but happy to share it with you in a future meeting with the hospital task force.
Okay, before you jump in, Christina, so we're at about 5:40. The meeting's scheduled to run till 6. So do I have other task force members? Aaron, you want to speak? Any other task force members? Okay, so we got a couple more. So maybe if everybody can try to keep it to 5 minutes, and we'll extend the meeting a little bit.
Shut me down. I'm just joking. A couple of things.
Usually it's 3 minutes, so I'm giving you
I'm
5.
just joking. A couple of things really quickly about the urgent care. The scope of practice for the emergency room physicians are not the same in an urgent care. So they wouldn't be able to perform the same task if we turned our emergency room into an urgent care. The ER doctors, yes, they are well equipped and could do it, but it's no longer in their scope of practice. And when the ambulance is transporting a critical patient to Mission Viejo, there's no nurse on there, there's no doctor, which an ICU has. The firemen are not allowed to do drips. So if you need to do something to some type of drip, which we've had to, in my experience as a nurse, we've had to go with the fire departments, different fire departments around the country, to transport them to a hospital because the paramedics, it's out of their scope of practice. When San Clemente closed, the idea of a freestanding emergency room is great. San Clemente busted their bottoms to try to get it. They went to Sacramento. They had Assemblyman Frau, Senator Bates came down multiple times, and then several of the council members went up to Sacramento. They came down here, had a 2-day conference, and then in the end, it was a no, point blank. The policy that the Health and Safety Code 1798.175 has not been passed. There is no existing regulatory pathway to develop or to have a freestanding emergency room in the state of California. So that means this is the same thing that San Clemente told all of their citizens, was that they were going to have or that they were going to do everything they could, and it looked promising to have a freestanding emergency room. With the retrofitting, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I thought that it was just the tower that needed to be retrofitted, and where the emergency room had been retrofitted. It's not. So where the emergency room is, would that be where an urgent care would go? So the whole entire hospital will be gone. None of it will be used. So the $10 million that was put into that ER was just wasted.
TBD. TBD, again, in partnership, I think, with this group and the city on the future of the campus. But as we have studied, at least preliminarily, that would not be the location that we would use for a standalone ER and other services in the ER proper today.
So in the last decade, the number of emergency room visits have went up 26%. So with the ER at Mission Viejo trying to go up Crown Valley, it's going to take you an hour to park in Mission Viejo and to get to Crown Valley. Mr. Ranagi made his comment about doing a ride-along. If we did an urgent care on that campus and we had to call 911, or if we were able to do a freestanding ER, how would you transport those patients up there with only 3 ambulances in the city?
I think that, again, is something that we would study with local fire, police, and EMS, along with the Orange County Healthcare Agency in an impact study to understand what level of transport would be needed in the future. It hasn't been studied yet.
And I understand everyone keeps mentioning heart attack and stroke, but there's so many other emergencies. There's respiratory distress. What if a kid gets something lodged in their throat? They're not going to make it to live long enough to get to Mission Viejo. That 30, 45 minutes to get to Mission Viejo. They don't have an airway. So how can we rectify that? Because the paramedics they can't do certain things that the emergency room can. You're in cardiac arrest, you're just going to do CPR for 30, 45 minutes to get to Mission Viejo. So how can we rectify that?
I think that's one we'll have to study, Christina, together.
So, okay, I think my time's up.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here tonight. A lot of my questions were asked by prior members of the task force. And so I have one.
Excuse me. This is Aaron Peluso, by the way.
Sorry.
For
Aaron
those who don't
Peluso.
know. Yeah.
Local resident. I have one main question for you, perhaps with a follow-up here. So I think, you said earlier, we've studied the 10-mile radius around here to see what the impact would be. And Providence's case for closing the emergency department, it really appears to rest on an assumption about where the displaced volume is going to go. We've got about 17,000 annual visits and the emissions that followed from them. Until June 30th, that assumption was reasonable, that Providence Mission Hospital was the nearest alternative for most Laguna Beach residents and who would have been customers for the Laguna Beach campus. So prior to June 30th, the volume, the revenue, the customers would largely stay within the Providence system. Just on June 30th, Hoag bought the Ziggurat campus. They closed on it. And they are, I think they stated something like they wanted to be within 10 minutes of everybody in South County. So it would fully be my expectation that they're going to build a brand new hospital there. So when you did these financial modelings, I presume it was before June 30th, right? Question.
Yes.
Okay. So with that assumption that they are going to build a hospital, don't you think it would be reasonable to rerun that modeling and see where those customers are going to go? Because like Tony was saying, there's going to be a bad taste in everybody's mouth with Providence in general if we don't get something that we deem to be acceptable here. And I think you're hearing pretty clearly that that involves emergency care at a very minimum. And if Hoag is a little bit closer and it's brand new, it seems like you're going to lose a lot more of this marketplace than maybe you originally counted on. So my suggestion would be that you take this back to your higher ups and actually do a 10-year forecast here of what it's going to look like then, not just looking backwards at the old model without Hoag in place and without competitors in place. Because when you have that map up there, you guys are all out on an island out here at Mission Campus. You got nobody around you. If you look at North County or Central Orange County, there's hospitals everywhere. There's lots of competition. But down here, you guys are kind of the only game in town until Hoag comes into town. And it seems to me that if you want to maintain as much of the marketplace in Laguna Beach and Dana Point and Laguna Niguel as possible, it would probably behoove you to look at what you can do here. Probably, a downsizing. There's lots of different ways to do it, but something that's real and substantial. That's not. We will not run a hospital no matter how much money you give us, because that says to me that that's just. Are you saying if we give you $1 billion, you're not going to run a hospital? There's no price. And so when you're coming here and you're saying, we want to work with you and we want to work collaboratively, but at the same time, you're saying, we won't do the thing that I think probably everybody in the room wants to have, you're not really being honest about what is possible. And you're coming here probably with orders from higher up to say, under no circumstance will we do anything differently. And so my question is will you take that back and reanalyze that with your group and look at what the modeling looks like with another competitive hospital between Laguna Beach and Mission?
Yeah, a couple comments.
Sure.
Yes, happy to take it back and look at the modeling or the financial analysis and all the other things that go along with it. The second part of that is can't speak to what the future of the Ziggurat property is or Hoag's real estate transactions.
Fair point.
They have not said they're going to run a hospital there, though they may in the future. I can't speak to that. We're planning around the information that we have today and that we know. And again, welcome feedback from this group and happy to share all the information that we have that goes into that planning. And I want to be clear. The intention in saying we won't run an acute care hospital in the future doesn't mean that we can't find a way together to provide all the services that everybody asked about tonight. There is a path in there, and I appreciate the comments about the challenges that San Clemente had going down this very same path, but I would also say it's a very different time. It's a very different time with lots of communities around the state that are coming up to different deadlines and different pressures that we're going to have to address. And so, the work that was done a decade ago-ish in that community, it's a different time. And I think we have an opportunity to do it together. And I think probably are going to have more support and interest, I think, not just from the coastal communities here, but really for other communities across the state of California that are looking for a solution to maintain care in their community.
So, next question. Earlier in the year, I think it was maybe in June, you had said, I believe, that you would hope to have a firm plan back to the community as to what you intend to do there by the end of summer, and I think we're about 4 weeks away from that. So, by firm, what is your model? What is your proposal that we can look at, and when are we going to see that? And can you give us a date by which we will see something? Maybe it's a range of proposals, but what are your ideas? When can we see that?
Yeah, what I would say is lots of things have happened even since that June meeting, including this task force being put together. I think that has changed in a very positive way our outlook on the plan, meaning trying to be inclusive. That's why we're here this evening. That's why we want to continue to partner with you folks and our city council members on the path forward. So we have ideas, I think, that we're going to be able to share with the task force at a future meeting. And I don't think that has to be terribly far out. But I think we'll be able to share those. And my encouragement to you would be, we're very open-minded, I think, in terms of the types of healthcare services that we think we can bring to this community. And we have lots of ideas where we're going to add healthcare services that don't exist today.
But under no circumstances will you run a hospital, even if the legislation changes and you get money from the community in an indeterminate amount, or maybe you're willing to revisit that?
We do not intend to run an acute care hospital in this community. Again, I think we can come up with a future state that's going to get all the things the folks in this room want to have, other than inpatient beds in a future state. And if you look at our hospital today, all of those services that are there, essentially we could plan for having in a future state. But we need to do, again, the invitation is to do that work together, that we're not going to do it and just say, here's what we're going to do.
I appreciate that. So when you're saying we will not have an acute care hospital, are you including, there have been a number of people who've spoken about a minimally sized hospital, 4 beds, 16 beds, something like that. Are you including that in we will not do that?
We have not looked at that.
Okay, so that is open in terms of something that's much scaled back. I think you've got 159 beds maybe permitted right now, but much scaled back in order to, I understand running a standalone ER is an option that you can go through with the state, but, it's a big ask. It would be a change in the law or an exception to the law in order to get that. So if you look at somewhere like Incline Village or Catalina or Mammoth, I think has 16 beds. And they run a hospital. I've been in it. And I don't think that they have all of these services that you said, like add to the cost. I don't think that they have a lab on site. I don't think that they have all of these things. I think, in fact, you've closed your lab because my neighbor, who you worked there for 40 years, got laid off when it closed. So
we have a lab on site, and we
Okay.
also have LabCorp
Okay.
that does all of our
Yeah,
outpatient lab drawing.
That's right. Okay. One final question. Our OBGYN, when we had our son, was working out of that campus in Laguna Beach. But I believe that there was a new maternity ward that just opened at Mission. And as a result, you were closing the maternity ward in Laguna Beach, and that was no longer available. This is 2018 or so. Can you give me a list, since Providence has taken control of the hospital, can you give me a list of services that have been discontinued and departments that have been discontinued at the Laguna Beach campus?
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Okay. I think that would be helpful. And I just wanted to point out, I've seen this stat come up a few times where we've got 84% are seen of the people that are seen in the ER are treated and discharged. The national average, I believe, is 85%. So we're right at the national average. And when you gave your broader numbers, which I presume are more specific, it actually worked out to the 80-20. So more people are getting admitted than the national average at this hospital. And it just seems to me like if we've got an average of 20 beds being utilized per day, why aren't we looking at a 30-bed hospital or whatever it needs to be, in excess of the average that meets the demand and has the appropriate cost structure? If that could be rehabilitated into the building, like has been suggested, you said certain areas, I'm confused, Sounds like you have a new idea of where you want the emergency department to be, but maybe those first two stores, they could be rehabbed. Those first two stories where the emergency room is, those could be rehabbed at a much lower cost than 300 million. The tower gets left alone. I believe it's connected by a bridge kind of structure there. I think they're two different physical structures. And we should be looking at that. And even if that wasn't the case, I think, AI tells me that it's about $30 million to build a minimal hospital with about 20, 30 beds. So you just build a new one where you were supposed to build the cancer site before. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple more task force members who want to speak. Okay. Emil.
Hi, I'm Milan Sanka. Nice to meet you. First of all, thank you, Seth and Melanie, for coming in and answering the questions. One comment I just wanted to make was on that slideshow that you guys made. Some of those ES1 numbers that you guys are presenting, is there any particular reason why it's not going to Little Mission right now? Is it just because you guys don't have the capability to handle like the higher complexity cases there? Okay. So my question is, at least from, my opinion, some of those cases should be going to Mission, right? Because if those are time-sensitive, illnesses, if they are not going there and you guys are already rerouting, I would imagine the best outcomes would be if those cases are going to in Laguna Beach. If there is a scenario that you guys do a standalone ER, would you be taking on cases such as strokes, heart attacks at that center or no?
As you know, it's not just coming into the ER if you have a stroke, right? You have to get IR, you have to get neurology, you have to get intensive care, right? And you have to be admitted in an ICU with nurses who are trained in handling patients on a ventilator with a stroke. It's an entire infrastructure that requires not just an ER visit, it requires a robust inpatient staff that is trained to handle complex medications, complex diagnoses, complex imaging, and it requires a team of physicians from multiple specialties to take care of patients even with a stroke. It's not just a neurologist, it's a whole team of people, especially if it's a severe stroke.
Right. That's exactly sort of the point I was sort of getting at is like in the middle of the summer, when the canyon's all backed up, that's critical time you're losing getting somebody up to Mission Viejo, right? So I think
these patients are coming to Mission Viejo and are having, we are deemed a gold center for stroke. We just received our Joint Commission recertification.
Right. But at the same time, you are still losing critical time when the gridlock is backed up. I'm not saying, it's not a comment about Mission Viejo. I'm just more concerned about when there is traffic backed up and I can't get out of Laguna Beach for sometimes 45 minutes to an hour in a scenario like that. And I've spoken with, Laguna Beach Fire and police, and they've mentioned that sometimes even they have a hard time getting out of the canyon. So I guess my question is, if there is a scenario that we can address some of those patients here locally just to make the outcomes better. So that's mainly my concern. Again, we've all sort of spoken to about having, acute care facility with emergency services. But it's just given that this population there's a fairly aging population, how can we get the best care for some of these older folks who are in town? So just curious, what the plan is, but again, I'm willing to sort of discuss that. That's my main concern. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're just about at 6 o'clock. We are going to take some public comment, but I understand, do you guys need to leave or have you got a few minutes or you have to go?
Bob, can I ask one question?
Yeah.
So I think like the root of a lot of these questions, which is, and first of all, thank you for the task force members for those really thoughtful questions that Bob and I've had a lot of conversations and these questions have been very helpful. One of the things that I've been grappling with is the question is, what is the impact locally on the loss of care, right? There's two questions. One is about the fact that we're going to have to take, not patients that we're now taking to Laguna ER, we would take them to Big Mission that takes fire trucks out of the city, having an impact. But then the other is just the question, which is a money issue, which we'd have to potentially add more firefighters, go to 4 to 3 of our engines. But then there's the health and safety issue of reconciling the HCI data, which I understand is the billing, compared to the ESI metrics that you provided today. So Seth, in our last meeting, you indicated there was a third-party evaluation that you did on the data of the impact of the closure, and I don't know if we ever got resolution of if that's something you're able to share with us, but is that something that you're able to share?
Information that we have is the information that I shared with you earlier in the meeting. Again, it's patient type, zip code, age, demographics, type of folks that are currently coming to Laguna Beach.
Yeah, but on our Zoom, you referenced a study that was commissioned by the hospital that basically would answer, I think, a lot of these questions. Not to say that's the only study we should look at.
We do have that, and that is something that I think when we have another forum with this task force, that we would be happy to.
But can you just email that to us tomorrow, hypothetically, or can we get that so that we can start looking at that internally? We're going to commission our own study. The county's going to do their own study, but I think the goal here is how do we get all the right data? Because anecdotally, as I told you before, that when you talk to the firefighter paramedics, they think that there is going to be a huge impact here, and that's anecdotal data. I'm not saying that we need to just listen to one source of data, but that's data that leads us to the conclusion that there is going to be an impact. So I think understanding your own third-party study that you commissioned before moving forward here, I think that would be really helpful.
We will take that back as an ask.
Okay.
Okay. Well, again, thanks to members of the public stay, because we're the Providence folks have to leave, but I do want to get input from the public with questions that you would like us to take back to Providence. So let's give them a minute to leave, and then we'll open public comment. Thanks, Seth. Thank you.
Thank you. And then,
Dr. Wolf.
So Bob, just to clarify for members of the public, so the questions that people are asking now, we can take notes of them, and then we can do a follow-up email to Providence to get these answers in writing, because they're leaving at 6.
Yeah. So having heard the Providence presentation, having heard the questions from the task force, we want to get from the public additional questions you would like us to present to Providence and get answers on. So come on forward. Thank you.
Hi, Trish Sweeney. They're gone, but my question was regarding the demolition, the entitlements, the redevelopment and future redevelopment, if there is any contracts currently for that property there. That's one. The second thing is duty of care for people who are corporate planners for events. All of the resorts around here, if there's no ER, that's going to be a huge problem for them, because they're going to go up to Newport, where they're going to have a beautiful harbor, a beautiful hospital, great shopping, great hotels, great food, and a hospital. So that's 2. The third one that I'm kind of, wondering is, has the task force considered the CRC? It's 6.4 acres. It's more than the property at San Clemente when they closed at 6.3 acres. We own it. Would the task force consider possibly partnering with another one if the clock runs out in 2030 and we still don't have any legislation from Sacramento? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carissa. I happened upon this room by accident, and I am a nurse who worked at Providence. And I'll tell you right now, an ER is not an urgent care, and an ambulance is not an ICU. And I think we should just get that straight from the start. When you work at Providence, you're required to learn 5 core values: compassion, dignity, justice, excellence, and integrity. We can be asked these at any time, whenever we go anywhere. And my interest is in if Providence is really exemplifying these core values. I would argue they're not. If you guys haven't listened yet to the Daily, they gave a lovely, interesting perspective on Providence. If you look up profits over patients, it is entirely about Providence. And I would have liked to ask a few things to them. Unfortunately, I can't. But
Well, we're going to get all these questions compiled and they're going to get
Okay,
to
good.
Providence.
I do find it interesting because I went digging at the county recorder's office. I got a bunch of deeds and I did manage to see the original deed, which is that available online to people, to the public? Yeah. I found that really interesting because of the land and the way it's designated. I do hope that or at least I'd like to request that the task force get a land use attorney and pull title on all of that land. Because I think briefly we discussed arguing eminent domain for the area, but before giving taxpayer dollars to compensate Providence, which ultimately it would do, I think the city should independently get legal counsel to examine every deed and a complete chain of title, healthcare use restrictions, revisionary interests, and any other rights attached to these properties, because I don't think we should negotiate away any leverage we haven't investigated yet. So I think it's really important to first do that and then go to the next thing. Providence no longer believes Laguna Beach is worth investing in, and they've systematically shut down all these services. I'm very concerned, along with the public, about the ambulance runs. They seem to be a little off. I don't think they exactly line up, but hopefully Providence can provide some clarification for that, because that was quite alarming. But if we could retain independent counsel to investigate the properties and explore other healthcare options, I find it really interesting that Providence and Hogue recently had their divide. UCI has invested a lot in the area, and I think it might be worth talking to other parties if Providence clearly isn't interested. I don't know how it can be a win-win when they want it to be a win-lose. As far as everything they said today, it just doesn't feel like it would be a win for us. What previous generations built for our protection, we have a responsibility to protect for the next. So I would like the task force to look into perhaps a healthcare land trust or something of that nature. I talked to a bunch of people in town who created the same thing in the canyon, or at least similar. And we aren't from a community that has nothing. We are very special in that way. We have that advantage. And so it would be interesting to see if there were other avenues we could simultaneously be investigating. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I'm Bob Cosgrove from South Laguna. I want to thank the task force for the questions that were raised today. And I had one question that kept bothering me. The third party group that they were talking about, who's funding that?
Oh, they are.
Yeah. Thank you.
And just just to follow up the question on that, one of the things that Bob and I conveyed to them was that we have no interest in talking about the zoning of the property until there's discussions about what the healthcare needs are, because that is the institutional zone is unique in that there are no by right uses. The zone is designed to accommodate what are the city's needs. And so within our leverage really revolves around those land use rights. And so we have no interest in talking about what the future of the campus looks like, because it's very valuable land and they understand that, without thinking about the medical component first. So just to clarify that. So I don't know what this consultant's going to do in the meantime.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon, council members Whalen and Ranagi. How are you today? Good. Look, I found it a little presumptuous on their part, speaking for us as our community, saying that we may not, we're just going to not even talk about anything beyond ER. Our community is not accepting that there shouldn't be an acute care facility there. What was presumptuous, and it got to me when I heard certain words from Mr. Tagan, said highest and best use. Now, I've worked in real estate, and that's a term realtors use. It's not a term that is used for if you care about the medical health of your community. And so when I hear about highest and best use, I think, well, I think, speaking for this community, the highest and best use for that property is actually a hospital. How's that? And not a way we have a work around low-cost housing to maybe bring in $10 million condos looking at the ocean right across the street, gentlemen. Okay, so let's get away from the cynicism on there. I've been in that hospital as an inpatient without giving out too much of my HIPAA rights, but I had to stay overnight there. I've had to, I know, I don't want to talk about family members, but had to go by ambulance one night using our facilities in Laguna Beach. By the way, was turned away and had to go to Sand Canyon. I have a lot of concerns about certain things. I found it a little disingenuous by a medical person to say that an ambulance is the same as an ICU. Where is the MRI or the CAT scan in that ambulance? What happens to somebody who is on Eliquis for AFib that has a slip and fall, and they need possibly brain surgery for a brain bleed? Is that going to be taken care of, okay, so easily with an ambulance? When I first moved to Laguna Beach, I remember knowing that this hospital here was the #1 employer of all of Laguna Beach with over 650 high-wage earners. We now have, God bless them, the Montage is the biggest employer with the lowest wage earners. Isn't that interesting? So what does that do to us as a community? Why don't they answer? Because they can't answer about how many people have died coming from our hospital, from ambulance. It's all conflated with mission numbers. But what shouldn't be conflated is the economic impact to Laguna Beach. How much have we lost with cardiac surgeons and brain surgeons no longer working here? Okay? What have they done to us economically as a community? We have a right to know that. And we have a right to know that we're taking on a tax burden as well as a health burden. How about, we have all sorts of, we were talking about emergencies. It's not just cardiac. We have rattlesnakes here. We lost 2 people who drowned at our beach. What are they going to do? Medevac everybody to Mission? Is that the answer? We're going to bring in helicopters when you can just go across the street because it's called an ocean, it's called Coast Highway, and a hospital. That's across the street, okay? Now, as a community, I've lived here long enough to know you don't mess with Laguna. We have, Tony Eisman is here. When we first moved here, we had 5,000 people, human beings, who filled up all our town walking down Coast Highway. And Mr. Bren called our bluff. He said, "You want Laguna Canyon so bad? Buy it." And what did we do as a community? We voted in a tax. Oh, really? A town votes in a tax to buy Laguna Canyon. That Laguna Canyon you drive down, thanks to Tony, we're never going to see homes there. We're never going to see homes there because the community stood up. So this man has the nerve to tell Laguna what we as a community want. I know what we as a community need. And so that is my thoughts on this. We also had, if we recall, some folks from a neighboring town wanting our museum too. We let them know about that also. Okay, so I have a feeling we're capable of letting these guys know about what Laguna Beach needs and wants and is willing to pay for it. And they weren't willing to tell us a price, right? We're not willing to talk. Well, gentlemen, it's not us that have the power. You represent us as a community. If eminent domain is an opportunity, look into it, because I believe That is the responsibility of our elected officials to look after our health, the health of over 6 million, 7 million tourists who come here, who look to us to be responsible for them, and we're going to send them. We're not responsible. Sorry, folks. Laguna Beach isn't responsible. Maybe Mission Viejo will be for you. That's not how we work in this town. And thank you for having this task force, for taking a look at this, and for listening to us. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, we've got several more speakers. I'd like to, if you could sort of keep it at 2 or 3 minutes, I'd like to see if we could wrap this up by 6:30 or so.
Try to do that. My name is Mike Wexberg. I live in North San Clemente. And I want to say I'm very impressed by the folks here in Laguna Beach and the people on the task force. Very, very good questions. The one thing I wanted to ask the hospital people, I'm an electrical engineer, not a medical person, but they show the statistics about the ER visits and so on, and but they mention that people with heart issues and stroke issues, they're automatically going to Mission Viejo. It seems to me that isn't really a fair comparison. I think we need to understand how many people in Laguna Beach, Dana Point, San Clemente are being transported to Mission Viejo with conditions like that. I think it's similar to one of the questions somebody else asked, but I think we need to understand that. Another thing I believe you folks need is I started reading the legislation that covers this seismic safety. There are some exceptions in there that we're hamstrung because our hospital is affiliated with Providence. We need somebody better than me to understand that, as well as the seismic requirements themselves. I understand there's seven structures on the campus that have seismic issues. This $300 million number, and they'll probably never show us. I think you folks need to come up with an independent estimate of what it would cost to retrofit the facility or come up with a plan for that. I also, a model, we're very fortunate to have these trauma centers in Orange County and elsewhere. Down here, a lot of the country doesn't have trauma centers, and it was pointed out by somebody earlier today. But they still make things work and people survive. I know where my brother used to live in Victorville area. They have a hospital there. It's not a trauma center, but then they have a separate cardiology unit that specializes in cardiology issues. And that's I guess, high occurrence in that area with a lot of retired people moving in. Maybe something like that might work for a hospital here. And then I wanted to ask you, are you talking to the folks at Hoag, or do you have a plan to talk to them? Because that's the obvious leverage that we have. That's all I have.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you for having this task force. I'm not nearly as eloquent as everybody else, but I just was a visitor at the ER. And I will tell you, I've never had better care. Everybody I talked to today who worked there was very concerned about losing their jobs and losing the hospital. And they said it was the best place that they've worked. They loved it. And I just wanted you to remember, sorry, it makes me emotional. In 1993, when we had the fires, you weren't taking anybody anywhere in an ambulance. This was the only place they could go. So if that happens again, what's their solution? And the other issue, I had a heart problem a few years ago, and we called Hoag and said, what's your ER like? Oh, well, there's 20 people ahead of you. We called the ER here, and they said, come right in, we will see you immediately. And then today, when my doctor said, you need to go get these images stat, and I called Mission, they could see me in 2 days, and Laguna said, you come in and we'll take you now. And I had to wait a little bit because they were busy. They weren't unoccupied, but they saw me. So I think that speaks volumes.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Ashley Sintis. I own Odo Sushi and a resident here. My question is for the city council, that if we can do what was just mentioned, independent assessments on everything, the engineering, the cost of the 350 that we found out in January for, and everything else that the task force has provided, and a lot of alternative ideas, that we can't just take the final answer of what Providence has stated today. And both can run in parallel. We can run independent assessments on every single idea at the same time that this is going on before the deadline happens. I would also say that there was a bill to extend the seismic requirement deadlines, and it passed both houses, which never happens in California. And it was vetoed by Governor Newsom, and it is election this year for the governor. And I would ask that all of us together as a community put that question to both candidates, because it is hundreds of hospitals that will close because of the 2030 deadline, not just Laguna. And so it's a very, very big deal for a lot of communities here. And so we should all be questioning the governors if they're going to sign it if it hits their desk. So thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi there. I've spoken a couple times. I've had multiple family members in the hospital recently. I've had my own family members that have gone there for chest pain and cardiac issues, and I want to let everybody know that they were able to be seen and treated at the Laguna Hospital. We do still see chest pain. We do still see walk-ins for strokes. We can start the medications necessary prior to transport, where an urgent care would not be able to do. I've heard today that they are very sure that we are not going to be an acute care hospital in the future. I wonder what this task force is actually trying to do if that's not even a possibility with them. You know, what are we accomplishing with the task force if the answer is no altogether? Secondly, they talk a lot about what is the percentage of patients at our hospital given current number of licensed beds. We are a hospital that has one medical surgical telemetry floor, one ICU, and one emergency room. At one point, we had many other specialties. Through the years, Providence has closed many different floors and specialties to where that is the only unit we have available currently to hold patients. So somebody asked for a list of those. I think that would be something we could also look into. And why can't we have more patients down there? Why aren't the doctors that used to share between the hospitals still being asked to do so? That's it. Thank you. And I do thank Mission for their care in Laguna for my family every day.
Good evening. My name is Gail Wade. I'm a 40-year, maybe more resident. I had surgery at Little Mission years ago, and I loved the fact that my doctors, a husband and a wife physician team, could operate on me. They had their offices in the medical building behind the hospital. They lived in town. Many doctors lived in town, had offices in the medical building and back. I was a resident on Fifth Avenue when the hospital was acquired by Providence. They were terrible neighbors. They had no intention of maintaining the property. I think from the very beginning when they bought it at a very good price at the time, there was long-range plans to somehow profit from this property. It's very valuable. And as far as the seismic thing, if you've noticed, UCI has rebuilt hospitals, 2 in the last few years, acquired 5 regional hospitals. The fact that they're not open to talking to other health organizations about possibly letting go of this property to keep medical in this town is very surprising. I mean, have you asked them, really, what is your plan for this property? When I lived on Fifth Avenue and I watched the cardiac care go away, the departments, as you said, disappear, the offices for the physicians. I actually took a friend to the substance abuse there, and he stayed 10 days. So they were moving in the direction of becoming, I think, a recovery center. And so as far as letting them go, I believe the fire department has already requested a 4th ambulance, have they not? I mean, folks, we know what's coming. We just can't let it happen. So I hope you'll be able to, they're looking to you to maybe change legislation. It's probably not very likely and take too long. Something has to be done to force them to realize we need care here. And if they don't want to provide it, let somebody else. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Diane Vanderlinde. I'm a new resident of Laguna Beach. We lost our house in the Eaton fire last year, relocated here, and you can imagine that emergency services are a very important topic to my husband and me. Imagine our delight when we found out that the only emergency room in town was probably closing down. The only reason I'm up here, because I might be repeating, especially what the just past speakers said, I chased down the hospital representatives when I wasn't able to ask the question with them in the room. And I thought it was important to just tell you their answer for the record when I said, I understand you have a right to operate. You have a right to make your own business decisions. The only thing I don't understand is why you would not be willing to let somebody else step in and provide the services that you cannot or will not. And I said, what is your rationalization for that? And the only answer I got was, well, we're hoping to come up with a better plan. And nobody in this room is stupid enough to not know what their other plan is. So I just wanted their answer to be on the record and let you know that you have a lot of unhappy residents, including the new ones.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity for us to be part of the discussion. One thing that I'd like to really emphasize is Providence can't just close the hospital. They have to have compliance from our city and their zoning and ideas and all of us. And we faced 17 years ago, we faced this exact same problem of seismic costs and the function of the hospital. And we worked with all the invested people, our residents and doctors and the Attorney General came through. And when it was South Coast Medical helped the transaction go through to make sure we keep a hospital specifically because of the transportation times. And those are all a matter of record. And we still have that information is even more salient now because traffic is even more impacted. So we have a lot of options that are not going to just allow Providence to say, sorry, we're going to close your hospital and we're going to do whatever we want. We have to be a part of that conversation. And I really encourage you as leaders in our town to stand up to say, no, we are not going to allow you to turn this into a urgent care center. We need that hospital and we need a vital place to serve our community. I'd like you to encourage you to help us to make that point and let us get behind you and reelect you to represent us in that fight and keep it. And also the reason a lot of those, the OBGYN children aren't born there anymore. And Providence closed that deliberately. There was a very large practice that wanted to move in. They didn't allow them to go in. And one of the doctors at Providence actually has reinvigorated their operating room, which is now 100% in use where it wasn't before, because there is demand. There is a tremendous demand out there that isn't being allowed to prosper. It's not just that the market isn't there, it's that they are purposely inhibiting it with ideas of other possibly housing ideas. And they cannot do that without your compliance. So please represent us and keep us a healthy community. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Next speaker.
My name is Brenda Boren, and I'm one of those 17,000 people who showed up willy-nilly in the hospital without coming in an ambulance. Partly because my next door neighbor, who's a pediatrician, said, if something happens to you and it's an emergency and you're able to get there any other way besides jumping on an ambulance, do it. Have Bob take you. I will take you. Get to the hospital as soon as possible. I told you that I'm one of those 17,000 people. And I've told you before that I had brain surgery 4 years ago. And in a freak accident, our garage door came down on my head this summer. And our next door neighbors ran over and Bob ran over and they were all go to the ED, go to the ED, go to the ED. I went to the ED. The doctor I talked to in the ED was very nice. He said, Brenda, this was a very hard part of your head. You probably don't have any need for a CT. So if you were my wife, I'd say go home. So I did go home because I trust this doctor very much. But in another kind of weird occurrence, I had a horrible headache, like a migraine, worse. And so I called my neurosurgeon's office and his NP told me, you know, we're not concerned about this headache, but we're really concerned that you were admitted to the ED and that they didn't do a CT. And you should know that anytime you have a head injury, you should have a CT. And so the reason for that, it's the same reason that my husband went and he was admitted, but he had chest pains. If you have symptoms of a stroke, you go to the nearest ED if it's possible. And that's why people don't take the ambulances. If they can possibly get a friend, like the wonderful doctor who had a friend. Didn't the paramedic tell you, I'm dropping you off at Mission? Maybe not. And so they told me go to the ED, and I went back, and they did look for a bleed or a fracture, and they didn't find it. What I want to know is, why does Providence continue to discount and, in my opinion, mock those people who think they have an emergency and that might be a life-threatening emergency, and say, oh, you don't count because you were not admitted and we didn't get your money? That's the question I want to ask Providence.
Thank you. Okay, we've got 3 more speakers.
Hi, good evening. I wasn't actually planning on speaking. I kind of popped in because I wanted to be here to support those on this fight, because we all have different fights in this town that we charge. I'm in my own every single day, and it's all worth it because I love this community. And one of the things I find really interesting, I'm going to try and tie it all together here and make sense, but I just came back from moving my daughter into college. And at the same weekend that I moved my daughter into college, I went and visited my uncle in the ER in Arizona. And I find it to be interesting because there was 2 different conversations that I had that weekend, because I also hung out with family and saw friends who are teachers in Arizona. And the conversation, and this is a little choppy, but my uncle's been in the hospital. He's 82. He's been in the hospital 20 times in the last year. And every single time he was admitted, he came in through the emergency room, because that's the right path that you go when someone's life is in danger. You check yourself in for a pre-scheduled service or different situations, but an emergency room is the one that receives these people, these human beings whose life is in danger, perceived, actual. We don't know. It's not our place to determine what kind of needs they have. It's the doctors. And if we don't have that service for our community, then what does our community become? We have 40% of our population. This is data that came out 2 years ago when I ran for the school board. We have 40% of our population is over 60. We have projected data for our high school that says that our incoming freshman class is going to be 150 students. So in 4 years, we're going to lose another 60 students in our high school, but yet our district is funded almost as well as our city, because the money that we get and we are responsible for overseeing comes from the people in this room. It is our responsibility to make sure that the services that we have in this community uphold the community. Because if we lose our hospital, if we lose our school, and the funding, because we don't have enough students and we have to keep getting smaller, then what does the city of Laguna Beach become? What did we all run for to stand up and defend if it wasn't the heart and the soul of this community? You cannot let new people, whether that's candidates for a public service, whether it's the city council or the school board, or Providence, you can't let people that aren't invested in this community, and that doesn't mean somebody new doesn't have a voice, because I respect the people that are here because they were relocated, because they want to move here. But it's our job to uphold the traditions and the standards of excellence that was what drew people here to begin with. And if we don't have an emergency room, if we don't have quality schools, no matter what our enrollment is, if we aren't stewards to ensure that the dollars that this community gives in their property tax and in their rents aren't used to ensure that their services are met, then we're failing. And so what this community is challenging you to do is to stand up and hold up the reason why they put you there is because they want to know that you're going to protect them, just like me. I'm not going to let new people come in. I'm not going to let them bully us. I'm not going to let them slander us and create lies to say that, oh, we're not doing our job. Do your job. Stand up for the people that have lived here longer than anyone else. Stand up for the new people that are coming here looking for us to guide and to ensure that they're getting the best services that they can. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker.
Hi there, Edward Beck, a longtime resident. First moved here to Laguna Beach in 1994, but I've lived in California 36 years. Laguna Beach has incredibly talented, passionate people, and you've heard a lot from everyone tonight. And I believe, Bob and Alex, the right thing to do now is to go talk to UC, Hoag and the other area hospitals to see if they'll come in and take over or an interest, because obviously this is a real estate play for them. That's all it is. And you should act upon knowing what you heard tonight. Use eminent domain, go talk to Hoag, go talk to UCI. I think you've heard enough tonight, and you should start that process, and I'm recommending that. I speak from life experiences. I've been very blessed. I own a communication company I started in 2012, and that communication company was taken over by the U.S. Coast Guard during Hurricane Katrina. They rescued 9,500 medical personnel and 35,000 people. 2,000 people died, but the U.S. Coast Guard stepped in and took over the company's operations to communicate, because there was no form of communication at that point in time. We stood down, they came in and took over our operations. Because of that, the company received an accommodation. And because of that, my last trip to Washington, D.C. was in 2016, where I met with Admiral Hewitt, because they were doing the rollout of 5G. So technology changes just like computers. My point to Alex and Bob, just start talking to Hoag. It's so obvious. And I love the people of Laguna because they're so passionate. And Al here, I was kind of giggling because he was talking about the canyon, and I've been around. I met Donald Bren, I met Gray Davis, and I know the whole story about the canyon. I know Tony Eisman really well. And I love Laguna Beach. And I've experienced a lot of ups and downs living here as well. But you should start the process. And if you have to, use eminent domain. And I have some other stories to tell you too, some pretty amazing stories about the BP oil spill in the Gulf and how it got stopped, because my background, I worked for General Electric, and General Electric's technology was the one that sealed the well. President Clinton called the CEO of General Electric, and that's what did it. But my point to you is public safety is important. Hospital is public safety. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, our final speaker here.
Thank you for all you're doing. This is my second appearance since March. We've come a long way since then, and thank you. And also thank you to the task force members as well. I just want to make some comments on on Dr. Wolf's comments. I actually don't think that's prevailing view of the medical staff, including myself. We do not believe that the ambulance is a rolling ICU. Just like you, Christina, I've been in an ambulance ride to fetch a patient from a different hospital to bring back to my home hospital. And I would never accept a patient who was not stabilized there already. And the same token, if I was a transferring doctor, I would never, ever send a patient on the ambulance unless they're completely stable from cardiac, pulmonary-wise. Once they're stable, it doesn't matter what they're on. They can be on 20 different drips with art lines, vent, everything. They can be transported safely. So I think that distinction has been made clearly. The second thing that I would like to point out is that Mission specializes in high-level acuity conditions because of their designation as specialty centers. It does not mean that Laguna Beach cannot handle those patients in early stages, stabilize them, and transfer. That's what's happening already in Memorial Care in Laguna Hills. They are not stroke receiving hospital, but when their stroke patients roll in, they actually have a teleneurologist who will get on the video with the nurse at the bedside, the patient. They can certainly be stabilized and be transferred for further care. And not every stroke patient requires interventional radiologist. Of course, it's nice to have as a backup, but I don't know that there is a place for a hospital like Laguna Beach Hospital and Memorial Care Hospital. And I think it takes a little burden off of the hospitals like Mission so that they can do those high-level specialties and care that they pride in, and they should take the pride in. So it doesn't mean that it's one or the other, but I think both systems can coexist and help each other. I think that is a true win-win situation that I like to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, final speaker. This is it.
Hello. Just a few comments and quirks on a few things. Our forefathers were not stupid building this hospital. They surveyed it very closely 77 years ago. They put it on the best piece of land there is. All the little banners we see at the hospital is just barely in the red, just barely, which is what, $200 million more to fix it or something? That's a drop in the bucket. Where can you buy a hospital for a couple $100 million? You fix it, you're good for another 77 years, 77 more years. If there was a real big shaker, earthquake that is, probably half of Laguna, Dana Point, and San Clemente would fall in the ocean. Where are they going to get medical care? If Providence shutters this place, let's say 5 years in earlier, is Providence still going to be responsible for thousands of deaths and injuries? I don't know. Go back after them because they closed the hospital. Then there was a big shaker. This hospital also has a helioport on it, on the 5th floor. It handles large helicopters. How do I know? Because I've taken part in loading those patients up into those helicopters. There's a special elevator that brings them right into the surgery unit, into the hospital for care. That's not being mentioned even. Though that helioport could be, whether is that in the retrofit or it's just sitting idle, which could bring in medical supplies, doctors, teams of doctors to come in for special surgeries, et cetera. And you're functional. Providence only has to send maybe 2 or 3% patients scheduling them or just recommending come to Laguna, and this problem is solved right there. Patients, services will follow. Patients, services will follow, but it's not being marketed that way. It's but anyway, that helioport that's going to be very handy when little drone machines for transporting things, that's going to come in big. And it's already got it sitting on the 5th floor of the parking structure. That's it.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you to all members of the public for great input, and to the task force, great job on questions. I think we've heard a lot tonight. We've got a lot of good suggestions as to next steps. I think what we want to try to do is, and I think we'll work with our city manager to outline some next steps for the task force. I think we want to see if we can break you down into some subcommittees, get some assignments going, and some analysis. I'd say that, a lot of what was suggested tonight, we've already begun to at least scratch the surface on. I mean, this will have to go on dual tracks at the same time, right? So we have to investigate all the possibilities, all the alternatives, including the one that, is being put forth by Providence. And then the task force is going to decide, make a recommendation. All right, do we want to pursue and ensure an acute care hospital in Laguna Beach with an emergency room, or is something else that they're proposing acceptable? But we're not going to just sit idle waiting for the Providence proposal to come along. I mean, we've got a request for information going out for the city to hire a healthcare consultant to help us, right? Advise us as to what's feasible, what's possible. What would a mini hospital look like? I mean, several of the folks tonight mentioned Catalina Island. Well, Catalina Island, which may have a different reimbursement rate, but they just got a 2.5-acre site from the Catalina Island Conservancy given to them. They're building a brand new acute care hospital, 14 beds, an emergency room, $175 million. So, there are lots of approaches that can be taken here and lots of alternatives to be looked at. And we're not, I just don't want the public to think we're just sitting back waiting for, what Providence proposes. We're going to look at the full range and engage. You can see tonight how talented this task force is in terms of their expertise. And we're going to make sure they're engaged in helping us to analyze, all the options. So I'll turn it over to Alex. I know he had a couple of things.
Yeah, I really like what, Alan, your comments about the sort of the history of Laguna. When we think about what Tony was involved with the canyon, no one would have thought that would have been possible, but it was. When we think about, a police officer gets shot, bleeds out, instead of just talking about it, what the community did was come together. I think they raised $600,000 through bake sales, and we're able to have a hospital. So really the question before us is, how do we ensure that for the next 100 years of Laguna's history, that we have the access to those vital emergency functions that we have today with the ER? And I think if there was a simple solution here, we would flip that switch, right? I think everyone in this room understands that there's not some easy way to achieve our goals, but I'm really optimistic that we can get there, not because of the legislative landscape or the regulatory landscape, but just because when you have human life at stake, I think there's something where you have to. I'm convinced that there has to be a solution here that advances Providence's goals of dealing with the financial issues associated with seismic, associated with just the whole healthcare industry, and the city of Laguna Beach's goals, and also the regional goals. And we've been in touch with council members from surrounding areas who are also going to be affected by this, because it's a hospital serves a region, not just a city. And so, there was questions about eminent domain, questions about whether we've been talking to other hospitals. I think from our perspective, all options are being looked at. We're not going to get into that up here because there's strategic reasons why we need to be having those discussions. Not in front of everyone as strategies are being developed, but I think everyone here should be assured that all options are being looked at and all options have to be on the table, because the stakes here are very high. And then finally, with that independent analysis that we'll be hopefully getting under contract under September 22nd meeting, we can bring in people who understand this. I mean, it feels like Bob and we've spent so much time researching this where we're getting in, getting our expertise, and we have these people in this task force. But our goal is that that we have all the best minds at the table who are able to give us the institutional expertise so that we understand all of our rights and all of our abilities to create a win-win solution here for Providence, the city of Laguna Beach, and the future of healthcare. So again, appreciate all the thoughtful comments. Appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to come here because it really is so important. So thank you.
So one final note to the task force. I think what we'll do is we'll work with the city manager. We'll send something out to all of you with at least a suggested, a subcommittee structure that we want your feedback on. Tom's had some ideas. We've had some other ideas from others. So we'd like your feedback on that. Next meeting, we'll delve into that and get people assigned to task forces and start doing some work assignments. So thanks so much.
I really appreciated your comment. Oh, thank you.